Okay, hello everyone. Good evening and welcome to our first study jam of the year. I'm Masha and I'll be your moderator for tonight. I'm super excited for today's workshop and I also hope that all of you are also excited to learn more about cloud computing and also AI. So everyone, are you guys excited as well? You can always type in the chat and interact with us, yeah? And if you want any permission to access your mic or video, just raise your hand and we'll give you the permission. All right. Okay. So before jumping into our main session, we'll be having a quick little icebreaker. So our team will be posting a Slido in the chat. So everyone can join in the link and answer the questions we have for you guys. Is the link in yet? All right. Thank you, Jun. Okay, join guys, join. Everyone can access the Slido, right? Okay. So the first question we have for you guys today is, if AI had a personality, what one word would you describe it as? So do you think AI is cool, smart, or even bossy? What do you think? Just drop your comments or thoughts in the Slido. Ooh, we have few people typing in already. Let's go. Ooh, dangerous, slave. Oh, wow, intelligent. Okay, smart, professional. God. Hmm. Meticulous, robot. Oh, we have a lot of smart and intelligent in the chat. Okay. Expensive. That's right. I definitely agree with you. Nerd. Hardworking. Okay. Money. Yes, money. Automation. Okay. Geek. More useful. Okay. Polite. Oh, okay. Interesting point of view. Wise, kind, amazing. Yep, it definitely is amazing. What else do we have? Oh, boss. Okay. Oh my god, girlfriend. Right. Okay. Somebody who knows it all. True. Yeah, definitely agree with you guys. Productive. Brilliant. Emotionless. Okay, I get that. That's empathetic and also emotionless. Okay. So the most answers we have here is related to it being smart and intelligent and brilliant. Okay, so it's really useful, I think. Ooh, future. Nice. My teacher. Okay, I definitely do agree with you. It is a very helpful teacher. Right. Okay. Thank you so much for all your comments. I love your energy. Let's move on to the next question then. Artificial. All right. Okay, moving on. We just want to know, what do you know about cloud technology? So anything that you know about cloud, just type it in. Storage. Yeah, okay, interesting. Storage, yep. AWS. Ooh. Aircon room. Okay. Virtual storage, right. IoT. Interesting. Internet of Things. EC2. CGP. Right. Any more thoughts? Any more thoughts? Can share and collaborate with each other. Ooh, all right. Web apps. Okay. Servers, database, softwares. Nothing. It's all right. Today you'll know at least one thing or two about cloud. I assure you. On demand. Right. Ooh, global warming. Interesting. Server. Virtual storage. App. Okay, it looks like everyone knows a thing or two about cloud technology, and some are also very new to this. So don't worry, this workshop is totally beginner friendly to everyone, and our speaker will be explaining everything to you guys today. So no need to worry. And yeah, thank you so much for everyone who has joined in and typed your comment in the Slido. Thank you so much for actively participating in our breakout activity. So now that the ice breaking session is over, it's time for the main agenda. So Please give a virtual round of applause to our speaker, Mr. Wei-Wen Liu from Singapore. So our speaker is, oh, hi Mr. Wei-Wen, we see you. All right, so by day, he's a senior engineering manager at Ascenda, where he leads engineering teams and builds impactful solutions. And by night, he's an active Google developer expert for cloud platform where he shares his knowledge at conferences and meetups to his community. So yeah, basically our speaker is the Batman of the tech world. So without further ado, we'll be passing on to the floor to Mr. Wei-Wen.
Thank you for the kind introduction. I wouldn't call myself a Batman in the cloud computing world, but let's do that. Thanks for the kind words. Okay, let me share my screen. Give me a moment. All right, I hope you guys can see my screen. Before I start, I thought that first size breaking was interesting. That first question, interestingly, I do think this answer is quite what should I say, relevant lah. I definitely would say adaptive is that quote unquote personality. I think for AI, in a sense that I think we call it smart, expensive, high maintenance, stuff like that. But I think one thing that probably is going to be quite relevant as you look at AI in this coming years or even the years before is adapting to what's required, whether it's new knowledge or whether it's like current new methods of doing different things, more ways of using AI. In fact, I think more and more you're going to keep seeing that happening in our world, and I don't think that's going to stop anytime soon. But the good thing is if you're onto this wave in the right way, you would be able to sort of ride it, and perhaps that will be a big part of your career as well. Okay, anyway, let's get started with our sharing for today. So welcome. Thanks for the nice introduction from just now. Today we're going to be talking a little bit about cloud computing, and then a larger part, the topic within cloud computing itself, AI, and we're going to run through a lab together and learn more about how to use Gemini within the Colab environment and how you could use that to implement in your own applications in the future. All right, so yeah, my name is Wei Yuan. I'm currently a senior engineering manager at Ascenda. I lead two teams, two travel teams in Ascenda. Travel here just means that we build travel-based applications like for flights, for booking hotels in our system, and this is mainly through our loyalty service for our different customers. Yeah, but previously I was also in other companies as well, like Grab. So I think that's also one of the places that where I use part of AI, but also like a lot of application building. Okay, so I'd like to first start with this question, which you may or may not be asking, but I think it's a good way to segue into understanding more about cloud computing. I think, and the question that was asked just now, and I'd like to offer you, three reasons, why you should look at learning more about cloud computing. Not even saying studying in school, but learning more about it and looking at embracing that tech as part of your work. And like to say that this is not just for DevOps engineers, but I will even extend it to application developers, even mobile engineers. I think it's great to understand how you can have the end-to-end knowledge. Like if you're building a mobile application, right? In the early days, 2010, for example, when the Apple App Store came out, when iPhone just came out as well, it made sense that you could make mobile applications that doesn't need the internet. You can just run on your phone. But nowadays, almost application needs the internet, needs some backend server, needs that interactivity, right, with some sort of state in the backend. And I think it's for that reason, right, why we need that backend cloud server, and more so now in the cloud world where there is so many different services that can be bring up by AI powered products. But let's talk about the core reasons, these three reasons why you should learn about cloud computing. So reason number one, it's very much aligned with industry trends. And I think this is very important to say, as some of you, you're currently studying in school, you're going to come out to work in society in a few years. And it's good that, you are following some of these trends to make sure that you're situated well in terms of your career trajectory, or, of course, it being aligned to your interests as well. And that could mean that you'll go really far in terms of your work. Okay, and why do I say it's aligned with industry trends? First, let's look at Google search trends. So if you look at global search trends on cloud computing, this is starting from around the 2010s. For your information, Google Cloud started around 2008. So around that time period, cloud computing became that inward. Companies no longer need to run their own infrastructure, but leave it to the cloud to do it. Okay, and this is not just a global trend. In Malaysia itself, this is something that it mimics that global trend as well. And many companies, not just on global scale, but even in Malaysia, leveraging cloud assets. Okay, but let's not just look at the search trends. Let's talk about the actual adoption rates. Inside the global companies itself, across the globe, more and more companies are moving towards the cloud. We're no longer in a situation where I think for most of you, you probably have never even been in that situation where you've interned at a company with, let's say, like some aircon room with a lot of servers. I think that I'm a little bit, okay, I'm gonna say I'm a little bit older, not a boomer, but I've been in that situation where I've seen that server room, the aircon room, their own data center essentially. But this is something that we're not going to see much today because a lot of companies have already transited to a cloud. Why employ your own security guard, your own like 7 layers of security that Google have when they are defending their data centers, and having to every time order a new server rack and getting more computing resources. Why not just use cloud computing to help you scale much more easily? Yeah. So on a global scale, you see that all these benefits comes in. That's why the industry trend is always going towards more and more towards cloud computing and lesser towards provisioning these resources yourself. Okay, but even in Malaysia, that is a trend that we see increasing over time as well. So that's not just for global, but even with Malaysia. Okay, and if you go in even deeper, right, you actually will see that this is not just from companies who want to move to a cloud, but even the large providers like, for example, Google. They broadcast this news last year, right? Looking at investing US 2 billion in Malaysia. So that's a huge pool of resources they are looking at in building up their data centers within Malaysia and bringing up that capabilities here to ensure that users in Malaysia and the Southeast Asia region, right, can have those affordable choices, across competing, of course, with other cloud products as well, right, in resources that can be provided to you and I or even startups in this region. Okay, so that's one big reason, industry trend. I think that's why you should look towards cloud computing. But another reason I'll give you is something that we've been hearing about every day, AI. Okay, and here's the thing, you can't say AI without cloud computing. I mean, you can, but what I'm saying is that if you are working for a company, you are either looking at building AI powered products or training your own models, you need cloud computing. I don't think you can run away from a big part of that, unless if you are a company that's as rich as Meta, for example. So, this is something that for most companies out there, you would need cloud computing resources to help you service your AI needs. Okay, now I'll talk about that. Okay, so in the article that I showed you earlier on, it also went on to elaborate that their investment is actually going towards boosting the AI capabilities within Malaysia itself. Okay, something that I would say you guys should keenly look at. This is something that would impact your careers in the near future. Okay, and looking towards cloud computing, right? There's two big areas, that I would mention, how it would impact your work or what you will use, right, in building more AI-enabled services. One main thing, manage tools for AI. Okay, not training, building those models yourself, but rather leveraging off the different AI models or services provided for by cloud services like Google Cloud. Okay, and using them to solve for many different sectors of services over here. So you don't have to do the heavy lifting yourself. Okay, and this is the same as, just now what I mentioned, where companies have built their own in-house data centers, have their own server racks, and they've moved to cloud computing, right? Is that exact same thing. Now, instead of just looking at managed infrastructure, you're also looking at managed services in the cloud. Okay, so that's one big benefit. Okay, the second big benefit is the same thing as I mentioned for the cloud computing. If you are a larger company, you can afford to have your own data science team to train and scale in terms of costing for your AI powered products. Okay, go ahead, go and train your own models, go and train your own LLMs. But what you need and what you possibly want to do is to use cloud computing resources, right? Get those GPUs in those virtual machines via Google Cloud, for example, rather than having to build the entire data center yourself. And the high chance that on certain days you need more resources, on certain days you need less resources could be there. So it's definitely more prudent if you make use of this cloud computing resources, right, by other companies that have already have those built in. And especially like large companies like Google Cloud, right, they can leverage off the economies of scale. For them, right, like for your company, you may be just looking at purchasing, I don't know, like 20 GPUs with fitting computers to it, but they are looking at thousands of those in a data center. So for them, right, they can buy all of these resources at a much more lower cost, run them, maintain them at a much more lower cost as well. So definitely leverage off their benefits over there for a lot much more lower costing resource. Okay, and there are of course examples out there of companies that have already done this, made use of the infrastructure inside Google Cloud to train their own AI models. Okay, so that's essentially that second reason. And the last reason I want to convince you is that cloud computing is all around us. I would not say the same for 20 years ago, but today, right, if you look around you, possibly, I don't think you can take, more than 10 steps without being able to find, one single device or tool, right, that is connected to the cloud in some ways or another. Yeah, so whether you're a student, whether you're an engineer in the future or data scientist, cloud computing is going to be there, whether it's you using it as a part of your work or even you utilizing it as a consumer. Okay, and from here, right, I kind of want to show you this huge graph. Don't worry about being able to read the words. I think the idea was actually to sort of bring that scale up to you in the sense that, like, this is a graph called Google Cloud in 4 words, or you can search up for it online. But essentially what they try to do is bring all the services of Google Cloud, put it together in one graph, and describe each service in 4 words, sort of to allow you to understand, what each service does and what's the scale of services they have. Okay, so with them providing for so many different services, right, I think we're living in an age where we have so many of these managed services helping us to build our own applications. So the larger value proposition we should ask ourselves today is, what are we using over here, right, to build our own services? Let's not spend time to reinvent the wheel to, let's say, maintain your own Postgres database server, or, as I mentioned just now, train your own models. If you don't have the resources to do that, to bring it at scale, but use these resources by the cloud to help you leverage on it, scale much more quickly, and possibly at a lower cost as well. Okay, hopefully with this, I would have hopefully have convinced you on the reasons why cloud computing is essential. Not just because of it alone, but also because of concepts like AI, which is extending towards. Okay, and that's very much relevant to our day-to-day work. Nowadays. Yeah. Okay, so let's get started going towards our lab today. Let's transition to that. So I understand that I think most of y'all have already received this cloud credits from our organizers. So I'm just going to walk you through the process of setting that up if you have not set it yet. Oh, okay, I see the link over there. Yep, so make sure you get that link. Okay, actually, let me take a quick look as well. Just want to make sure it's the same. Okay, yeah, it's the same link that I usually they use during these conferences or these workshops. Yeah, so I think there's also a guide over there, but I'll sort of walk you through the steps of doing it. You can also follow the guide if you feel like I'm running at a slow pace. Okay, so yeah, if you go to that link that was provided inside, I mean, you have to go to that Google Docs link, and then they have like this other link that's pasted over there. So if you select and click into that link, you should be brought to a page like this where they'll ask you to log in. So for most of you, as students, right, I'm sure you have your own private Google account, right? Do sign in using your own Google account that you are that later on you can also use, for your own development experience. Like let's say later on you want to test other things using the same credits, you can, make sure you use the same account lah. If you are working currently or if you're interning, right, I think some of you might have Google Workspace accounts as well. I will not advise you to use your work accounts for this, just in case. Like I think for some companies, they actually restrict their users from using Google Cloud, using the Workspace account. So just make sure you sign using the right account. Don't get into, don't get yourself blocked out from using this code from there. Okay, so sign in pretty clear cut. you should be able to see this screen come out, and then make sure you click this button to access your credits. Basically, they'll bring you to another page. Okay, so the other page should look something like this. They'll ask you to fill in your details. Just make sure you double check the details, make sure it's correct. Google account, make sure it's correct as well, not your company Google account if you're doing an internship somewhere. And make sure you don't share this code as well. Like if you share this with your friends, they other people can redeem it, and most of this is just one-time use. Yeah. Okay, and yeah, if you once you're done with that, you're done checking, just click accept and continue. Okay, so setting up is really easy. I think getting to this stage, like by this time you should have the credits already, or rather you have tied the credits to your account. I can slow down here if needed, but anyone facing any issues so far? Okay, do type in the chat if, hi, sorry, yes, me, haha. Oh, okay, yeah. Let us know, like, if there's something that's stuck at, we'll see how we can help. Mine just show up blank. Ooh, okay, interesting. Uh, I, okay, I'm gonna try running that as well. So I haven't run with that link. Okay, so it's like try gcp.dev. I think you all have the event ID. Okay, I don't have the event ID. Oh yeah, I guess Matusha, I think the participants are asking what's the event ID. Possibly they need to append that to a URL. If not, it won't work. Mm, is there event ID? I think so. Okay, yeah. Okay, I think while we are waiting, maybe let me just hold on. I'll jump in a little bit ahead, then later we'll come back to this setup steps lah. I think while we're waiting, so just to maybe touch on the lab that we're going to be looking at a little bit later on. So later on, we're going to try out to use Colab, and of course using Gemini 2.0 Flash within Colab. Of course, the use of Colab here, right, just to elaborate, is basically think of it like a environment that you can use to run, it's sort of like the Python shell that you can use to run like certain Python code. And we're using the GenAI SDK to leverage on the Gemini 2.0 Flash model. And we're going to run different functions on it just to see, how we can stretch its use cases. How does it work? Okay, and from there, right, we'll learn how to use simple use cases, multi-model use cases, grounding, code execution use cases. Yeah, so essentially, yeah, quite a lot of nice things to learn, as part of like how to use this AI over here. Okay, and yep, so just a few tips while we're waiting. Just a few tips later when you're running through the Colab, right? One of the annoying things I've seen. Okay, sorry, this is not the annoying one. The annoying one is the next slide. But this one, if you are running through the steps inside the notebook, right? What you can do is press Shift Enter, and you sort of bring you to the next step. So let me just show you what this means. So if you look at, like, here I have that notebook, right? So essentially, let's say I'm on step number 1 here. Okay, so this one, if you look at it, of course, this is not really Python code. This is just comments inside. So if I click this play button, essentially you'll just run this cell. You don't have to do this later because it's just running comments. But later on, like those with code, you actually have to run them. So like, for example, this one is to install the dependencies, or like, this one you have to import some dependencies over here. Yeah, so if you feel that, if I don't know, if you don't like the mouse, you can click like Shift Enter. For example, I'm over here, I can click Shift Enter, and you just keep going down to the next cell. So a lot more quicker, if you want to run it. But definitely, I would say don't just run it very quickly. Just make sure you read the code over here to understand what's going on. Okay, I can see that the link is already shared. Okay, let's go back to setup first, just to make sure. Okay, hopefully it works for everyone. So I'm not going to redeem this. I think for some of you, just make sure you all have sufficient. Okay. Yeah, do let our organizers know if you all have any issues lah. Yeah, I can see the click here to access your credit. So yeah, I'm not going to redeem that, but I think for you. participants, you all should go and redeem it. Anyone has have any issues so far? I think the page does look like it loads for me. Oh, if yours is blank, I'll suggest if you can click the link above that Madusha added in, or if it doesn't work, I'll actually suggest if you can log in and log out again. Sometimes it's yeah, sometimes it's linked to login sessions, I believe. Okay, maybe I'll go on a bit ahead first. I think okay, nice. Okay, so let's go to the next step. Let me restart my slides over here again. Okay, so once you have went through, you have redeemed the credits, go to this page over here, console.cloud.google.com/billing. Okay, okay, and so what we're going to do over here is for me to make sure that you have this account details over here, the billing account. Okay, so the thing is this, using Google Cloud, right? Typically, what it means is that you need to put your credit card inside that Google Cloud account. But if you have this billing account, right, they actually like it means that because this billing account is a little bit like a credit card, but only for Google Cloud use cases. So if you have this, right, essentially you can tie it to a project and you don't have to put your own credit card on this account, which is a good thing. Yeah. So make sure that you go to this page and this thing is here. If this billing account is not here, like this, of course, this account ID should be different now. But if this account is not here, that means your earlier step you didn't do it right. But if you did it right, then this thing is here. If you didn't do it right, go back to the last step. Try to get the credits to attach it back to the right Google account here. Okay, all right. So this one very clear cut. So if just now the earlier step is done correctly, then you can proceed to the next step, which is go to this page, console.cloud.google.com/project create. Okay. Review on. Okay, let me also copy this. I'll put inside the chat. Actually, I realized since we have this chat here, it will be really easy if I put it inside. Okay. Yep, so that's for project create. I'll put the billing one here as well for those who, if you have not checked it yet, for billing check. Yeah, so make sure you go to that project create page. Okay, so if you're at the project create page, yeah, very simply create your project, like put in a project name that you can remember that you can tie to this event, or at least later on if you are looking at using this, testing it yourself, something that you can remember that you will use later on. Okay, and billing account, make sure you select the trial billing account. If you don't have this option, is okay. It likely means that because this one usually only appears if you have more than one billing account. Like for example, for myself, I have a credit card tied to my own Google Cloud account. So usually they ask me to choose. So if you don't see this option, it's fine. But just make sure that you write in like the right project name that you want to use here. Yeah. Okay. And click create, once you're done. Okay. So in case just now you didn't manage to see this selector to select that billing account, make sure you go to this link over here and make sure that that project, like this one is the project that, let's say I'm trying to create this project called try GCP-AI. Make sure that that billing account is tied to this correct name. Okay, if not, right, if let's say you see this billing account is to your credit card, right, okay, then big problem already. Later all the lab that you do, right, you might end up charging to your credit card instead. Okay, I'll put the link here as well to check billing account project. Okay, yeah. Okay, I hope everyone's registration of this is all right so far. Please do point out if you have any issues. Okay, and I'll jump to the next step in a bit. Okay, I think it seems like nice. Thanks for responding. Yeah, seems like everything is good so far. So once you're done with what's that? Checking making sure you've got the right credits, project is created. Now, from the net console page, right, go back to the home page, okay? And on the top of the page, you will see a search bar. Search for Vertex AI API, okay? When you search for Vertex AI API, you should see there's this icon over here. There'll be a bunch of results. There'll be one with the icon API, and then the option itself is Vertex AI API. Select it, okay, and they will bring you to this page where they will ask you whether you want to enable this API. Okay, make sure that on the top of a page you are in the right project, okay, and click enable to enable it. Okay, so this is needed for the lab later. If you don't do this right, some of the steps you will get like some error later on, and they will ask you to come back here to enable this anyway. Uh, Sorry, after I create a project, they had an error mentioning additional access. Okay, I've not encountered that before. Are you referring, okay, to Joy? Are you referring to this one? This, after I created project, they had an error mentioning additional access. Okay, my guess is the this one, right? Do you have more than one? Oh, maybe you didn't tick. Okay, I don't know if there's like a tick option. Yeah, maybe you can look into that. But my guess looking at this is if you have more than one Google account, not Google Cloud, but Google account sign in, you might be going to the wrong Google account to try and create the project. Because I know yeah, some companies also restrict like whether they restrict on Google Cloud use level or the resources in Google Cloud, like not being able to create the project. Yeah, so it could be possible if you're using the wrong account too. Yeah. Okay, let me go a little bit ahead. I think for the rest who have managed to get the account creation as well as the enabling, make sure you've enabled this API. Okay, this is required later on. In the steps later on inside the lab, you also have a chance. They also let you know you have to enable this, but I'm just showing you like doing it a little bit earlier so that we don't have to do it later on. Yeah. Okay, so this is where we just now jumped to earlier on. So I'm going to skip this since we have talked about the learning outcomes already. We also talked about this just now, which is the shift enter to to move like from steps to steps very quickly. Okay, so this one is something that annoying problem about Colab that I meet sometimes, like sometimes when you see this markdown cells, right, inside Colab, like each of these boxes is a cell, and if you see like these pictures, links, some of this, what do you call it, the title tags, if you click into it, sometimes you pop out in this HTML items, right, inside this cell. So the idea is that when you click out of the cell, sometimes it doesn't collapse back to the preview. So it makes that entire experience of reading through some of these cells a little bit more harder. So what I would suggest you is, yeah, click Control Enter to be able to force it to preview, go back to the preview mode for the cells. Yeah. So if you get that problem in Colab later, you can remember just press Control Enter, and then yeah, you should be able to get back to this preview page. Okay, I'm gonna leave this up for a bit. Okay, actually, you know what? Let me just. I do have this in my. Since this is online, so usually I use this more for offline presentations, but since we're online, I can actually send the link over here. So what's going to happen is that if I'm going to paste this link over here. This is the same deck that you are looking at right now, a public version of it. If you find that I'm running a little bit slow, you want to look at this, you want to run a little bit ahead and try the other concepts, go for it. I think, yeah, definitely good, if you want to explore things a little bit faster as well. Okay, all right, so let's go into the lab for today. So first things first, so there's this link over here. I believe it might have already been shared, but I'm going to share it here again. We're going to be running through this lab today. Okay, so do click into this bit.ly link, this shortened link. Okay, it should bring you to this GitHub page where you will see this lab that we're going to do. Okay, but the issue is that it's in GitHub, so we can't really run the code over there. So what I need you to do is click this button, open in Colab. Okay, Okay, click this button, open in Colab. Okay, and they should be opening this Colab in the new page. Okay, and then once you have this new page that comes out, right, click this button on the top of the page, which is copy to drive. Okay, so what happens here is that if you click this copy to drive, right, they will create a folder in your drive for your Google account, and then save this lab over there. Okay, so in the future, if you need to, let's say you were experimenting with this Colab, you change some of the Python code to test out how Gemini works, they will save that, persist that change, right, inside your Google Drive if you need to visit it later again. Okay, and you are running this, by the way, all in the cloud. So this is using Google's virtual machines rather than running it locally. Okay, so I hope you guys have managed to get to this part, being able to copy to drive. So at this point, I'm going to go over to the lab as well. So you should be able to see something like this. Because I've already copied to my drive, so I don't see that copy to drive option anymore. Okay, but you should be able to get this same exact intro to Gemini 2, 2.0 Flash, and then this introduction over here. Do go ahead and read through it later on, I think after this lab, just to better understand what this lab looks at, aims at, educating or teaching us about. But yeah, I'm going to run through the steps and explain these steps along the way, and do run through these steps together with me, sort of to have that interactive experience. Okay, so let's go through the first few steps. Is a bit more of setting up this lab. Like, you can look at this entire Colab, right, as one giant Python shell. Okay, and you are running like different Python commands in there. So of course, at the start, you need to make sure you have the right dependencies, right variables in there. Okay, so make sure you run this first two cells over here to install the required Python packages for running the lab later on. Okay, and then as well as authenticating your user for this lab. Okay, so what this needs, or what this means, is that because this lab needs your Google account to call your Google Cloud project details later on. Okay, so they need to have your user credentials here. Okay, okay, and yeah, just click this play button so that you can run through these two steps. So I already ran this before the lab so they have already both have run successfully, so I don't have to rerun it again. Okay, so both of this should be quite clear cut. Like this step, for example, you get like a pop out, and then they will ask you to select the right Google account. So choose the one you selected just now, and then make sure you just sign in and enable the permissions from there. Okay, so once you're done with that, you can go to this next step over here. So you can see over here, this is like, if you've been using Python, right, this is probably up your alley in terms of, same things that you've seen before. So as mentioned, as part of setup, you need to make sure that you have the right variables in place. You need to import the right libraries. So over here, we're importing the required libraries for the rest of this lab later on. At this point, I would say you don't have to worry about what each of these modules are supposed to do. But later on, you'll see clearly, where each of them are used. All right. Okay. Hope everyone is doing okay so far. Okay, I'm gonna move to the next step. Do let me know if I'm going a little bit fast, or if I'm also going slow. Let me know as well. Okay. So the next part, you're given two options over here. I think this one is commented on your side as well. Yeah, but you can essentially close option 2. You don't need option 2. Go with option 1 because we have already set up all the required. We've done all the setup earlier on. Like this is essentially what you need to get your this entire lab running. Okay, to get your project ID, don't copy my one over here. Please get your right project ID. But to get your correct project ID, what you need to do is go back to just now your Cloud Console. Okay, and you will see basically you can either find your project ID over here in the middle of the page. Okay, you can click this copy button to get it, or if this project ID is not correct, right, like this is not the same project that you created just now, then what you need to do is just click this button on the top. Okay, and then they will just pop up a list of projects. They'll just show you a list of projects that you've created before. So just choose the right ID and just copy the ID. Okay, so once you have copied the ID, go back here and just paste it over here. Okay, so quite clear cut so far, and then click play. Okay, and then they will basically just run through this code over here. They'll import this OS module, they create this variable, and then they will load the Gen AI client using the right project ID that you have set in here. Okay, so by the end of running this once you've run this cell, right, you're supposed to have this client variable. If you haven't run this, right, you try and run the other steps later on, like you'll start seeing some of them fail. So make sure this runs without any errors. Okay. Okay, let's go to the next step. So this next step, this one also quite clear cut. I don't think you have to change. I think this value should be correct on your end. Don't need to change anything. Just click run over here. But this is essentially just assigning a string value to a variable. So, but later on, we need to use this string variable to indicate what models we're using throughout the lab. Okay, but just to show very quickly, while folks are like setting up, right? Okay, so just let you all know that like from the slides that I'm sharing, but also like in this lab itself, the some of you might be wondering, where do you get that like Gemini 2.0 Flash code or ID lah? Okay, so you can actually get it from this documentation over here. They will give you the list of model variants as well as the code you can use. You can put inside your own implementation to invoke the right model. So in this case, we're using 2.0 Flash. If you want to use Flashlight, you can also do that, or Pro Preview, you can also do that. Yeah, so you can go to this page to figure out the list of models that is available for you to use, that you can integrate inside your code. All right. Okay, so this one, yeah, super clear, very, very direct. This is just getting the string variable set up with the right string values. Okay, the next step is where the fun begins. So this is where we finally start to get ourselves using the Gemini, the GenAI SDK and using a Gemini model. Okay, so this one, very direct. What you're doing over here is you are sending a prompt over to the model, like this client variable, we created this string variable we created on top here. So we are sending a prompt over here via the generate content method, and we're asking them a question. Okay, what's the largest planet in our solar system? Okay, so of course this is not hard coded. I mean, the model itself is trained on data, taken from the past, of course, and then they are using it to generate these answers for you. So of course this is not static. If let's say you pass in a different prompt, like for example, now asking it what's the largest moon in our solar system, you should be able to get a different response, being printed over here. Okay, so this is a basic use case of integrating with Gemini, integrating with the GenAI SDK in getting it to process some prompt and giving you some response. Okay, so let's look at other ways of using this GenAI SDK. Okay, so the next one we're going to be using is, rather than calling generate content that we called over here earlier, we're going to be using this method, generate content stream. Okay, and what this does, so observe the effects over here. Okay, so I already have the output here, but let's rerun it. So observe the effects over here. So you see that it comes out one by one, like this responses. Okay, so this essentially shows the capabilities of these models over here, because it's when you are generating a response, right, you don't just generate the whole thing wholesale, but it's always like predicting the next output from it. So when the first output is out, it's never going to change that. So it's actually okay for the SDK itself to actually send that result to you. So you can actually display that for the user, and then they will go on to predict the next output instead, and then it goes on and on and on. Okay, so what it does over here is essentially, I mean, you can think of it as this is just another additional feature provided by this SDK. So rather than making your users wait for 20 seconds for a response, you can actually start sending in part of this response for them to read, sort of to understand what's the answer over here before even the whole thing is out. Okay, so of course, if you're building let's say, I know, a backend Rails server integrating with a front end JavaScript server, right? Front-end JavaScript application. What can happen is maybe you can put in something like a WebSocket implementation from backend to front end. Okay, and then using this, right, you can constantly push out the values, and then you can almost instantaneously or asynchronously display the values very quickly for the user, rather than, as I mentioned, right, waiting for the whole response and then sending that whole response, one big chunk at a time to the user. Okay, so this is just, yeah, as I mentioned, just another alternative way of using this SDK. I mean, I can even take this query over here, right, that we've asked earlier on. Okay, let me just actually let me comment this out because I don't want to remove the code. But you can essentially do the same thing over here as well, the same query, and run it over here, and you should be able to find a similar answer. It won't be the same exact answer, but you'll find that it processes in the same way, like, rather than everything come out at once, it give you like part of the output that it can generate first and send it back to you. Oh, hi, sorry, I tried to run and it said client error. If I'm not wrong, this is relating to the permissions mentioned earlier on. Uh, okay, I think likely if you see the cell, right, the error cell, it will indicate the error in there. But this goes back to, I think, one of the things I mentioned earlier on, which is that you have to go to your Cloud Console page, go to Vertex AI API, okay, search for Vertex AI API, I mean, and then click the option from a search bar and just click enable. I think it should be related to this permission issue. Oh, okay. Okay, I'm not sure about this then. Like, I think try and look at the error cell. They usually they would tell you, what's the error from there, like what type of issues is causing it. Uh, trace what response equals. Huh. That's interesting. Okay, I'm guessing the 12345 is the line number. So this is not part of code. Okay, that's okay. Mm, hmm. Yeah, that's weird. It's not indicating any actual error over here. Is anyone getting the same issue? Yeah, that's something I never seen of before. Let me just Google really quickly. Client error. Client error is thrown when HTTP 4XX status is received. For details, please read. Okay, looking at just from a okay, 403 permission denied. Ah, okay. I'm willing to wager it's still related to this thing I show on the screen, but I'm guessing that you enable with the wrong project. So because this is the same message I've seen in similar folks who run the lab and then they get the permission issue lah. Yeah, which is referring to this Vertex AI API. Yeah. So I think you have to make sure you go back to the screen that I'm showing over here to select the right project. Like it must be this one over here. Like for example, for mine the name is built with AI-2. And then make sure that like if you go and visit this page currently with the right project, you have to see if this, I think the text over here should be enabled rather than this enable button. If you see that it's enabled, that means it's already enabled lah. Then that means you've already enabled it. Yeah. Okay, let me move on ahead first. I think with so for other folks, I hope you have already run at least to this step to what's that? Understand how generic content stream works. So the next part is very interesting. It's about creating a chat-based experience instead. So the thing is that for some of you who have used like different AI-based chatbots, right? Like for example, Gemini, you would see that they don't just look at like answer one prompt one by one. They actually understand from the history of what you're asking and then try and answer based on the context of that. So essentially, this functionality over here replicates that same utility. Okay, so instead of just calling the generate content or generate content stream method directly just to answer for one prompt, what happens over here is that you'll actually be creating a chat variable. Okay, so over here we'll create this chat variable first. Okay, using this model ID. Okay, and in the next cell over here, you'll see that we are trying to run this send message method using the chat instance. Okay, and basically asking it to write some code. Okay, so I'm going to run something slightly different from all of you, just to prove that again, like this is it actually remembers the context of your previous question before. Okay, so over here, I'm just going to, instead of asking it to write a function like without saying the language, I'm gonna say ask you to write this function in JavaScript. You can still run this prompt, like go ahead and just run this one. What you will see on your side is like likely to generate something like this Python code. Okay, but I want to show you that you can also prompt it to get a different language instead. Write the code in a different language. Okay, and you see that you will in this chat you will generate this code over here. Okay, let's try and actually see if this works or not. Okay, I'm not going to run all these examples, but maybe I'll just run part of these. Okay, and since we're in the browser anyway, let's just run from the console over here. So essentially, they've generated this is leap year function. Okay, and you can look into this code deeper later on to see if it's really working as needed. But of course, if we pass in a certain numerical input, it should accurately determine whether it's a leap year or not. So 2024 was a leap year, 2000 is a leap year, 1600 AD is a leap year as well. Okay, so if we run this, we should get true, false, false, true, true, false. Yeah, which is correct over here. Okay, anyway, this lab is this particular part is not about running code lah. So I'm just showing you that it runs something that's pretty accurate. Okay, but the important part is understanding that this works as a chat. Okay, so if we need to look at this as a chat, that means if I ask it the next question, right, it should remember that it generated a function in JavaScript for me. And for some of you who ran this prompt, right, it will remember that it generated a function for you in Python. Okay, so let's try and run the next step. So if you scroll downwards, now our next step over here, we're actually going to ask it to write a unit test for the generated function. So this one is the older one I generated when it generated the code in Python now. So it generated these test cases in Python. But now that I ask it to generate the initial code in JavaScript, this should change to test cases in JavaScript. Okay, preserving the history of the chat. Okay, and you can see that when I run this, I will get it in the suspense. Yep, you can see over here that it comes out. I think this is a jest test cases. Let me read very quickly, or maybe it's not. But yeah, you can see over here that this is clearly written for JavaScript instead. Yeah, testing, doing assertions, testing, and then doing the assertions directly in this test function. So this is clearly for the JavaScript function written earlier on, not for the Python code that some of you might have. Okay, and you can see very clearly that it does preserve that history of this chat. Okay, so yeah, essentially that's how a chat works. You can continue prompting, adding more queries to it, and it should be able to continue to make use of the earlier context. Okay, now I want to move us to the next step. All right, so after chat, we have this next one, which is setting asynchronous requests. Okay, so this I would say is more for application developers where perhaps you're used to writing backend services where you are running multiple processes or multiple threads, running your different requests in concurrently. Yeah. So over here, what's happening is that rather than let's say generating calling like generate content once and waiting for one response, what you can do is actually run a bunch of this asynchronously and then run a wait on each of them. Okay, so this is not so much of a Gen AI functionality, but it's more like a base Python functionality. I think the library itself is called async.io. Okay, let me go to a slide format. Yeah, it's this async.io library. Okay, so essentially it's the use of coroutines, which are special functions used to achieve concurrency, like as mentioned just now. Okay, so this is not threads and processes, by the way. While I'm saying, I'm using the concept of threads and processes, but it's just more so to bring forward the concept of concurrency. Yeah, but essentially over here, you should be able to achieve concurrency by running, let's say, like multiple of these prompts, like going through at once. Okay, and like waiting for all of them to finish together before you run, let's say, like another function in code. Okay, so it's just showing you another way that you can use to execute in parallel, okay, not really in parallel, in concurrently, like multiple prompts that you want to send to the model. Okay, so just a nifty way to show you how it works, how you can use this SDK in a different way. Fundamentally, like again, if I go back to like the earlier generate content methods, right? Okay, so let's go back to the top. So we have this one, right? Again, I can go back down to this async this async methods over here. I can just change the prompt over to this one that we used earlier on finding the largest moon, right? Fundamentally, it's the same lah. I mean, you still get back the same response. You still get back the same response. Yeah, it's just a different way of using an SDK and integrating with your code. Yeah. Okay, so you just need to add this additional namespace over here, client.aio models generate content. If you omit this AIO, then essentially it's just the same thing that you had before, which is yeah, not using this async IO library. Okay, let's go on to the next part. Oh, this next part is interesting. So now we've looked at how to use simple basic use cases of the Gen AI SDK and being able to do some asynchronous processing over there. This next part is looking more towards configuration or the configuration you send to the model, to sort of change how they process your prompt and generate the output in different ways. Okay, so over here you can see that this from this code. Let's read it first before we run it. So we have the prompt we're going to send in over here. Is asking about how the internet works, but pretend I'm a puppy who understands squeaky toys. Okay, but the more interesting part is this configuration of parameters over here. You can see there are some very common one that is usually used, like temperature, top P, top K. Some of the temperature itself, randomness of the response. Then of course you have other things like the max output tokens, stop sequences. Okay, so all this, like, you can read the documentation to see how it works. But one advice I have for you is the general ones that you should sort of know, and mostly what you will be using, right, when integrating with this SDK, right. I would advise that you actually go over here. You can see over here, I have the Google AI Studio open as well. So besides testing it on the code lab, when you're running your own Python code testing in this lab, you can also test code inside Google AI Studio, or rather, not testing code, testing prompts inside the Google AI Studio over here. So you can see over here that I ran this prompt over here. But what I want to introduce is that you can use the AI Studio and change these different parameters that you've seen in the interface just now, right? By using this UI. Okay, and it gives you a much more clearer way without having to go to the documentation on what each of this is. So this is, as I mentioned just now, the randomness, or over here they call it the creativity. There's also top P as well, probability threshold, okay, and things like output length. So I think, yeah, this one is a much more easier way, in my opinion, if you want to sort of craft out use cases for these prompts before you actually integrate to your code directly. Okay, it's much more easier than testing on Colab. Colab, I would say, is a bit more for learning, but also sharing with your teammates if you are sort of testing out a use case of this Gen AI SDK together. Okay, and Google AI Studio, the other really good thing is, after you write this prompt and you think that this prompt with this configuration is really good, you can actually click this button over here, this code icon, and it will generate to you the code that you need to run. And of course, you can take this and put it inside Colab, or you can take this and put it inside your Python server, your Python backend server, and see how it works. And it's not just for Python, you can use it for different languages as well. Okay, so this is a really good advantage of using AI Studio in testing our prompts. Okay, usually people use the AI Studio to test their prompts directly from there rather than Colab. But Colab, we're using it today more so to run through this predefined steps to learn how this Gen AI SDK works. Okay, so just now over there inside the AI Studio, I already ran this prompt. I get a very sort of a very huge answer, but let's try and run it here as well, just to see how this configuration works. Okay, and you can see that compared to AI Studio, right, I get an answer that's very different. Or rather, it's not even say different. It's actually shorter, like it's like an incomplete answer. Okay, puppy, let's talk about the internet, blah, blah, blah. You want Mr. Squeakyton, you want to play with Mr. Like, you see that it abruptly stops. Okay, so this is due to the configuration that we set over here. Okay, if you have a keen eye, right, you might have already seen that there's this one line over here, max output tokens. They set it to 50. Okay, so this is essentially worth up to 50 tokens of output. Okay, so if you want to get, like, this is basically, if let's say you have a quota on your users, like when they're asking questions, right? And you want to make sure people don't ask questions that might end up spending too much money on your site. I mean, you can sort of configure this output over here to prevent this from happening, sort of that stop condition. Or, over here, if we want to get a more complete answer, but we just want to set a higher limit, you can also do that by, let's say over here, instead of 50, I change it to 500 lah. Okay, so now if I run this, I should get a more complete answer. You can see over here, now it no longer stops. Just now it stopped somewhere around here, right? Like we had this output, but now with 500 tokens, I get a more complete answer, but it's still not fully complete yet. Yeah. So of course, if you omit it, I believe if you omit it, it just gives you, that means there's no limit. It just gives you the whole answer. Yeah, so it should give you the whole answer. Yeah. So this is just one way of showing you how that configuration works lah. You can configure this, right, to get a different performance or get a different output or outcome you want from this SDK. Okay, hopefully this makes sense. Do run it, see if you get any issues. I'll just stop for a little bit to let you play around with this for a bit. Do ask any questions if you have as well. Okay, hopefully everyone is doing okay so far up to this step. Okay, I'm going to move on a little bit ahead. Okay, so the next part, we're going to be learning about setting, they mentioned over here, set system instruction. But what I would say this is that it gives you an alternative way of interacting with the model. So rather than having like this huge prompt that you send to the model, right? What you can do is sort of have a instruction to the model first, right? To explain to it, what it's supposed to do. Okay, and then the prompt that comes in, right, is basically just to guide the response towards what it's going to solve. Like for example, in this case, right, I may be asking this model over here, right, to do some translations. Okay, so of course I can just send it a prompt and say, translate this input, I like bagels, to Spanish. Okay, but your user input may not, like they may not take that into account. They may not add those additional content in there. So what you might want to do is actually to separate that system instruction, right, into a different value, okay, and send that in separately to your model over here. Okay, so we're going to try and run this. Okay, by the way, you're not going to get a lot of this over here. Don't worry about it. Later on, I'll just uncomment this and show you what, this is like additional stuff I wrote in here, just to show you how you can use the system instruction in a different way. Okay, but let's try and run this first. Okay, so it should be able to give you that translation of this text from English to Spanish. Okay, I cannot speak Spanish, so I don't want to embarrass myself here. But yeah, you can search online just to translate and see if this is correct. But what I'm going to do is me gustan is me like, so yeah, this one should be correct. But I'm going to show you a different way of using system instruction. So some of you might be familiar with the term single shot prompting, multi-shot prompting. And what I want to represent over here or share with you is that you can also pass in a multi-shot prompt as part of your system instruction to guide them to give you much more personalized answer. Like just now when I pass in this prompt, I just get the answer like this one text immediately. But what if I want to generate something like a structured response, like, for internal logging, or maybe, I want to pass it and then show, what you actually were trying to translate earlier on. Okay, so over here, right, you can actually provide, let's say under system instruction, I'm providing a multi-shot prompt over here, passing in some examples, telling it, okay, if this is the user input, like Pokemon, I should get this translation out as well. So this entire thing, it should be considered like, one such output. Okay, and then I give them another example, another such output in this translation. So what happens is after I pass this multi-shot prompt in through this system instruction, when I indicate to it that, please do this translation, what they'll do instead is they'll provide the output in this format rather than just translating this text as is lah. Okay, so let's try and run this. Yeah, you can see over here that it provided that response inside. Like they gave me the initial input as well as the translation, because this is what I asked it to do. Yeah. So this is just showing you a different way of using a system instruction as well. You don't exactly have to just give a very simple system instruction. In fact, I've wrote like a very long system instruction for one of the for some of the prompts I've sent, like in my own use cases. Yeah, just to give it a little bit more context of what type of output, like guiding it to the right output that you want it to do. Okay, hopefully this has been like insightful to how you can use this so far. Okay, let's go to the next part, safety filters. Wow, safety filters is also another important thing that we should learn, because here's the thing, in the end, AI is just a tool. And when you ask the tool to do something, sometimes they hallucinate and sometimes they give you responses you didn't expect as well. Okay, and because these tools can be used by kids as well, they can sometimes come up with not so ideal answers. Okay, so over here, what you have is essentially, right, allowing you to set in the filters for safety settings, so that you can prevent in some situations, right, the model itself to generate harmful content, back to the users. Okay, and I think on your side you should be able to see like all this value set over here. But I just want to show you. Okay, so these are the different categories you can use to set this different threshold. But I just want to show you that there's more than just one level that they indicate their include as well. Okay, so I think over there they're showing the block low and above threshold. But you can also choose, let's say, if you are more tolerable to certain content, so you can choose the block only high, or if you want, you can also block none or off lah. Yeah, I think off is the default. So if you want, no, sorry, off I don't think is default. I think the default, if I'm not wrong, is block only high. But I probably need to look into this. Okay, but anyway, when you're using this, just make sure you set the right settings for your users. Okay, you don't want the model to generate harmful content for them. Okay, so let's try to run this. So over here, we send a system instruction to ask the model to be as mean as possible, and then we ask it to write disrespectful things. Of course, usually we don't ask this type of questions to the model, but here we're trying to trigger the filter. Okay, let's see if this works. Okay, let's run this. Okay, so the printed response. Okay, so over here, what happens is that the disrespectful things are generated. We actually didn't manage to successfully block it. Okay, so over here, yeah, basically, okay, some of this, you can see this is the response over here. So response dot text basically is this whole thing over here. So this is their response. Finish reason is referring to this line over here. So if it's blocked due to safety, it would change to finish reason dot safety instead. Okay, and the final part, safety rating, this one is just to indicate to you of each of these categories which one was triggered or not. Okay, you can see over here that the probability is exceedingly low. Like you can see, for example, for hate speech, it's like probability score of like 8 to the power of negative, sorry, yeah, 8 to, what's that, times 10 to the power of negative 5 lah. So this is like 0.0000005 zeros, 5, along with 2 more zeros, because this one is 8%, so you need to divide by another 2 more decimal places. So it's all very small. I think the largest one over here is harassment, but it's 0.03, which is again very, very small. Yeah. So because all of these are very, very low, unfortunately, it wasn't blocked. But let's try to see if we can set it even lower. Okay, so I'm going to pull off this. Actually, I can just use this one over here. Well, actually, it's already blocking at a low threshold. Okay, let's try and run it again just to see if it will block. Because I think the content itself, so all this content that's generated is, okay, you can see over here, after I rerun it, it blocked due to safety. Yeah, so because this content that it generate is not deterministic, so it's random, like they generate the output like based on the probability of the response from the backend. And because of that, the probability of it being a risk as well also changes from run to run. So over here, because we set the threshold very low already, or rather we set a very high bar for you to clear, that means it must be not risky for the users in order for it to be displayed to the users. Yeah, but in this case, after you rerun it, you can see that over here, actually this time around is blocked, and it's blocked. Okay, so you can see finish reason.safety. They'll say the one category that is causing it to be blocked over here with this value of block equals true. Okay, and you can see that this is the harassment category with a probability, ooh, this is quite high, 90%. Yeah, so it's actually at the severity of medium. So that's why it was triggered, because over here we block it at we block harassment at low and above lah. So this is basically, yeah, it crosses the threshold of medium. Of course, if we had set it to only high, then that medium itself essentially would not trigger over here lah, because I believe you only impact for these two thresholds over here. Okay, hopefully that's indicative towards the safety filter settings over here. Okay, so like I said, you can change these settings as you want based on the target audience who are using your application that's using this AI powered product. Okay, let's go on to the next part. So this next part is interesting in that so far we've just been looking at running text inside, like setting it to this model. Okay, but now we're going to be finally using a different input, not just sending text in, but can we actually send something like pictures, images into this model, and can they actually read the content of these images? Okay, so we're going to put that to the test. Okay, so over here they ask us to download this image. Actually, you don't have to download it. I mean, they're asking you to click this cell to download it, so please don't click this download it for real lah. So yeah, just click this cell over here. Okay, what happens is that this will essentially just use the GSUtil utility, which is basically the Google Cloud Storage utility, right? And they will copy this file into your remote machine that you are using over here. Okay, so this is like this compute engine backend. So this is in Google Cloud. Okay, so you essentially just pull this file into the local machine or this, not your own machine, but that remote cloud instance. Okay, so once you have done copying that file, okay, you'll see this operation complete over one object over here. Okay, and once this is done, you can run this next step. Okay, before we run it, just to read to you some of the contents over here, essentially what you're trying to do is you are looking at opening this file, okay, and then saving the entire contents to this image variable. And then what you will do is send the entire data for this image over as part of this generate content function call. Okay, and you will send it together with this prompt over here. So remember, this is the first parameter here is the image. The second parameter over here is the prompt for them to process this image. So over here, our question is we're asking this model to write a short and engaging blog post based on this picture. Okay, this picture over here is this kind of glass bento box of rice, broccoli. I think this is capsicum. Yeah, bell peppers. Yeah, and then I believe this looks like chicken. Okay, let's try and run this. Okay, and you can see over here that you can double check if the content relates to the image that you send in. Okay, it should be relating to that image. Okay, so over here, conquer your week with meal prep mastery. Okay, so a little bit like a blog post lah, talking about over here, they're kind of telling you how you can cook your own food, I guess, meal prepping. Yeah. Okay, but let's say if you think that this is not relevant, of course, you can do something. Let's say, okay, let me copy this over here and then I'll comment this. Write a recipe based on this picture. So you can do something like that as well. Okay, so again, they'll read that same image and then they will show you, they'll output the response. Wow. Okay, so if you're interested, you can go and try and cook this and see if it comes out with something good. If it's good, I don't know, just poke me on LinkedIn or something. I would love to see if someone managed to prepare this and see if it works. Oh, I don't believe this though. Prep time 20 minutes, cook time 30 minutes. Oh, actually, no, no, no. Yeah, 50 minutes. Actually, that makes sense. Thought it means like cooking in 30 minutes. Okay, so this makes sense. Uh, okay. Anyway, it's all these models are trained on recipes found on the internet as well. I'm gonna say probably this is 80%. I mean, I'm 80% confident it's correct. So if you're interested, you can try and run this and see if it really comes out with a good dish. Okay, but anyway, joke aside, let's try other functions, other multi-model functions of the of Gemini over here. So just now we looked at downloading an image and then passing that image in a variable over to the model. But we want to try and do something different over here, which is rather than downloading that, right? Can I just pass the file URL directly to them? And you can do that as well. Over here, you can see that we have this file linked to cloud storage. Okay, and let's try and run it. So you can see over here, instead of downloading the image, you're not reading the image anymore. You're just passing that image link over to the model. So over here, essentially in code, you are not downloading that file in the local machine. It could mean that this, like from an application development standpoint, it's a much more, I would say, efficient way of doing it, where you use less memory on your local machine to be able to process this file. But rather, you're letting the remote service, which is this Gemini instance, be able to do that processing of that file instead. Okay, so that helps you out more in terms of what's that? More resources needed on your local machine over here running this code. Okay, and you should get the same response as well. Okay, I believe I downloaded this. Did I download the PDF? Okay, actually I didn't download the PDF here, but you can look for this PDF later on. I think this is referring to a research paper. Actually, wait, I think I did download this PDF. Let me see if I can show you. Okay, I believe it should look something like this. Not exactly, okay, the link looks different, so I'm gonna, let me create a new page here. So you can actually take this and see what's the, so it's this papers that they wrote on Gemini, if I'm not wrong, and then they publish it. I mean, they publish it already. Oh, this is the one. Attention is all you need. Yeah. Okay, but basically what happened is that they just put this inside their cloud storage bucket and then this bucket is called cloud sample data. Yeah. So we're essentially just passing the link to this cloud bucket, linking to this image, and then we're just passing it to the model over here. Yeah. Okay, so anyway, the SDK itself, when you pass it, when you call this managed service, right, they're able to read this file, pass this PDF file, so not just images as we've seen earlier on, but pass this image file, and they're able to run a prompt or instruction that you have on top of this file. Okay, so yeah, you can read this over here to see if it's accurate. So this essentially is a summary of this entire attention is all you need document, yeah, which is of, oh my god, 15 pages. But you can see they were able to process it quite quickly. Yeah. Okay, so not just images, but also things like files like PDF files as well. Okay, but not just PDF files. How about audio? So again, we're going to pass a file URL here. We're not going to download it, but you can actually pass this MP3 file over here. Okay, you can ask them to create a summary of this as well. Okay, so you can click into this and listen to the MP3 later on just to see if it makes sense. But you can also see that they will immediately run through the contents of this MP3 file instantly and give you a response right away. You can see this is really fast. If I go into this link, okay, hopefully it doesn't block. Okay, basically, I don't know if you heard that, but this is like a 31-minute podcast episode. Okay, so it's really big, but you can see that the model itself is able to process it quite quickly. Like 31 minutes in just a very short instance, they're able to give us the summary immediately. So rather than doing it manually, you can actually, another good use case for a model to give you a good use case that you can get out from it. Okay, and you might be thinking, okay, I can send video and audio through like this SDK and get them to do something interesting there. How about, let's say, if I want to ask them to process a video through YouTube as well? Okay, because YouTube is also owned by Google, so of course they will make it work over here. Okay, so you can also create or link it to this YouTube video over here. Okay, and let's try and run this. Okay, and they will Oh, at what point in this video is Harry Potter shown? Okay, let's look at this video while it's running and see. We will put this to the test. Let's see if this is accurate. Let's wait for your run. Okay, so it says at 56 seconds. Okay, let's see if it's correct. 56 seconds. That doesn't look like Harry Potter. That is not Harry Potter. Oh, it is. It is. Oh, okay. Okay, I guess it. Okay, yeah, kind of correct. I mean, this is Severus Snape. Yeah, from a Harry Potter movies. Okay, so yeah, this is correct. They managed to find the correct answer from there. Yeah. So you can see that this is another capability of the model itself, being able to process video input as well, and instructions along with that video input. Yeah. Okay, so far images, text files like PDF, audio, video. Okay, so yeah, uh, multi-model different inputs that you can pass into this model and get some good output from there. Okay, let's go on to the next part. So this next part is going to be, I want to preface this by saying that this is going to be one of the more important things you will learn from today's lab. Why do I say that? Because when you are looking at building applications, AI-powered applications with Gemini and with this Gen AI SDK, I'm going to say that in the generic use case, you would likely end up with chatbots, because what we have seen so far essentially is just, hey, uh, ask a question inside, pass even the image, audio, video input, right? You pass it in, right? They'll come up with something that's a little bit more text based. So it's almost like chatting. And usually that ends up being that, you'll get like a very much chatbot functionality. Okay. But what if you want to build something more than chatbots? Okay. So this is where I believe that, being able to force the Gen AI SDK to give you a structured schema, like something like JSON, would provide you much more utility. So what you can do from there is you can actually take that JSON, right? Based on different properties that come back, maybe you can save it in a database, or you can use it to compute a value. You can use that to pass it to your front end, and your front end can, let's say for myself, I work for, I mentioned just now, right? I lead a few teams who build travel products. So if I'm asking an AI, right, to generate, let's say like a airline ticket, okay, and maybe like predict like an airline that would serve at a particular date, okay, and then they might give you I might ask them to give me like a JSON response that I can use to display on the front end. That I can ask my front end, okay, display the airline name, display the airline code over here, and then show the image from the airline code. So you can see that I don't just need to rely on displaying text, but if I break it down into something like JSON, I can give different meaningful properties, right, to display on the front end as well. Okay, so not just storing on the back end, but also displaying on the front end. Okay, over here, we're going to run through an example of how we can have a structured response from Gemini, not just getting a string response. Okay, so over here, you can see that what we're going to do is we're going to provide a class over here, and we're going to send this class, right, this recipe class, into this response schema property over here under the configuration. Okay, and we're also going to indicate that the MIME type over here is JSON, because we want the response to come back in JSON later on. Okay, so once you pass this question in, right? Okay, so you can see that you will get the some structured response over here. So it won't just okay, let's try and compare. So let's say if I'm asking this question with and without this controlled generation. Yeah, so let's say if I take out this configuration, okay, then let me try and print it first. Okay, and let's compare and see what happens. Okay, I'll put a new line over here, just so we can differentiate more clearly. Okay, so imagine, like I said, you're building an application. Okay, so if you're building an application, right, you get this like sort of markdown like entry, and if you display this to users, right, it also might not look very nice. I mean, it's sort of chat based, but it doesn't look very nice to display it in this format. You might want to add a little bit of CSS in here in your front end application. Okay, but if you go down to the generated, control generated response, right, you see that it gives you in some JSON instead, which is much more indicative of like you can save this on the back end, you can display this in a much more indicative way to display in your front end. Yeah. So that's one way of getting a structured schema. Okay. And yeah, basically over here, this one is just what's that? Predicting the past response. Yeah. So essentially the same thing you see over here in JSON. Okay, but that's just one way of doing it. If let's say you're trying to use Gemini through a language that's not Python, you don't want, like, of course over here this is very much tied to the Python class. You can also use the Open API standard, where you can provide the schema in sort of a format like this. Okay, admittedly, I would say this is much more intuitive compared to the other class-based implementation. So using this format, you can essentially just determine, okay, like the base value should be an array, and inside this array, each of the items should have another array, and then inside the nested array, you should have an object with properties like rating, flavor, sentiment, uh, explanation as well, and then indicating what are the required values inside this object over here. So it should be a nested array of this object. Okay, so let's try and run this code and see if we get the response. So again, like I said, this is just another alternative way to give you the response. And you can see over here, it's a nested array with an object over here with the different properties like explanation, as mentioned. You have, let me scroll out, okay. You have flavor, which is mentioned over here as well. You have rating, okay, and you also have sentiment mentioned over here, rating and flavor, sentiment as well. Yeah, so this is like a nested array of multiple inputs that you have put in over here. Okay, and like I said, this is something that you can just take it, display on the front end. They'll loop through this nested array, and then they'll display the useful response for like in the format that you want for user. Or you can store this in like multiple rows of data in your backend, rather than storing it in like that text that people read right in your backend now. So a much more useful way for you to build your applications using this structured response. All right. So hopefully, like this is something that is useful for you. When you're building applications in the future, not just getting like chatbot-like response. Okay, but let's go on to the next part. The next part over here, it's about showing you how to count and compute tokens. Okay, I'm gonna say right off the bat that I will focus more on the count tokens portion. The compute part, I haven't seen so much of the use cases yet, but you can try and see what you can use with this in the future. But let's start with count tokens first. So count tokens, I think, is definitely very much useful from a utility restraint standpoint. Like just now, we talked about the output token, max output token, where you like if we limit it to 50, you don't get the full response, right? Because this is mainly for companies. Let's say you are representing a company, or even for yourself, you have an API key, you have a limited quota, you want to make sure you don't max out that quota. Okay, so by using methods like this, like count tokens, right, you can actually understand what's the utilization coming out from this particular prompt over here. Okay, but more so than that, this is just one way of like before you run the content itself, like to sort of understand how much resource you would use. But what if you already just want to run this prompts, right? And you just want to understand what is the resource use. You can also make use of this usage metadata value to understanding the underlying resources utilized for each of this prompt. Okay, so let me try and run this. Okay, and you'll see that, okay, firstly, I'm asking it what's the highest mountain in Africa. Okay, and it managed to generate the right response here. But more so than that, you can also make use of the response coming back from this method, right? In the metadata, they actually would tell you, how much tokens is spent over here. So input tokens, this is the output token count, input token count, and then there's a total token count at the back over here. I think it's 21, right? Yeah, total token count 21. So 21, total token count 21 of input and output. Okay, so you can count from here, right? Yeah, input of 9 and output of 12. So in together, yeah, it should add up to 21. Okay, so what's useful about this? You can take this, send it to, let's say, your own metric monitoring tools, like for example, Grafana, Signal FX, Datadog, for example. So you can lock down all of those values, and then on the money level, for example, you can check how many people are using your AI services, how much tokens is being spent over here, or if you can even set up alerts. If let's say if you're afraid of your budget being exceeded, you can actually use this as well to, let's say, a total amount exceeding a certain limit. You can use that to trigger alerts from there as well. Yeah. So I would say this is a very useful use case, like to be able to count the tokens or find that token count from the metadata of your methods. Okay. Okay, going to the next part, compute tokens. This one, I think not too much for me to say. Essentially, it's just based on this input prompt over here to compute the tokens directly from this input prompt. I haven't seen a lot of good use cases from this. I think this is much more so the internal use case of this Gen AI SDK. Yeah, but if you know of something, know of how you can use this within your own applications, let me know as well. This is something that I've not seen being used around too much. Okay, but let's go past this part. Let's go into, so I think we have maybe around like 10 minutes left. So I want to make sure I cover the remaining parts. So we have an important concept here, grounding. So grounding over here is going to be important because it touches on topics like RAG, which is retrieval augmented generation. What it means over here is basically this. All these models, right? Like for example, Gemini, trained by Google, right? Is trained by data in the past. So if you're asking Gemini a question like, tell me the weather tomorrow, they likely won't have that answer because all of their data is trained in the past. But if you're asking it something like, tell me the largest planet in the solar system, they can pull from their the data they are trained from in the past to give you the best educated answer. But a better way of generating a educated response, right, is actually to make use of data archives from current day. So for example, if let's say there's already the accurate data online on the internet, right, you can actually okay, let me click out. Yeah, you can actually make use of data found online in Google search to augment the results that you generate from your model over here. Okay, so that's just one representation of grounding, implementing the concepts of RAG itself to give you more accurate, more grounded response. Yeah. Okay, so let's try and run this over here. So over here, we're trying to ask it, what's the next solar eclipse in the United States? Okay, so this is the same as what I mentioned just now, like sort of like asking it the weather. Okay, but the thing is, you can see over here that because we are passing this Google search tool inside, we are essentially making use of this grounding via Google search. So what would happen is that they would make use of these results they find through Google search, okay, and give you a much more accurate response. Okay, and you can even see over here in the metadata itself, right, where they get their data. Okay, of course, if you try and render the content, right, you actually get this button over here that you can click, and then they will actually tell you, where they get or where they sort of find that response from, lah. Yeah. So of course, if that's something that you can also build that in the application to show users and let them go to Google search and find the accurate response from there. Okay, so yeah, this is just one way of showing you. Of course, you don't have to print this if you don't want to. I mean, that button is just more so of a functionality of their of this Gen AI SDK. Yeah, but you can actually get, like I mentioned, a good or accurate response through grounding the data that's used to generate this response in this Gen AI SDK. Okay, so and Google search is not the only way to do it. There's also another way of doing this grounding through using Vertex AI search, so creating a data store over there. Okay, but for this exercise itself, I would we won't be running through this. You can try and run through this yourself later on. I think running through this data store, creating it can take around, I would say, like 15 minutes to 20 minutes, and then again like connecting it to here as well. But try and run through this on your own time using the credits that's given to you. Okay, but the concept is very similar to what you see in using Google search over here, except that over here, right, you're creating your own data store, sort of like creating your own database and then loading your own results inside. Then you will use Gemini over here, the model over here, to read from the data store that you created. Okay, so instead of using Google search like you saw just now, right, because if I go back up here, This is Google search. But over here, we're using our own data store. Okay, and this is useful if you are, let's say you're building like an e-commerce store like Shopee. Okay, rather than like you don't want to search online to ground your responses, right? But you want to point it to your own data store that you can create your own self using your Shopee database. Yeah, so you can use Vertex AI search to do that too, to ground the responses coming from Gemini. Okay, all right, we're almost to the end. We have, I think, few more to go. I believe we're on function calling, and I believe the next one is code execution. So we're almost all the way to the end. Okay, so function calling, this is the second of the most important concepts that I would say you should learn or take away from this session. So the first one just now we mentioned is the control generation, like getting a structured response. The second one is function calling. Okay, so just to explain function calling very quickly. Okay, function calling. Okay, let me just okay, yeah, open my slides over here. So function calling essentially is this, can be represented by this one diagram that you see over here. Okay, essentially, mostly what we have done so far is this one single step over here, and this, this. Okay, let me use a. Okay, I'm going to show you a very nifty tool. Okay, so essentially, the function right now, how we have been using our this Gemini so far, right? When we are sending a prompt over, right, is essentially this and this so far. Okay, we pass a prompt to the model, and then the model returns a response back to us. Okay, but function calling is a little bit different. Function calling, right? What happens is that you pass that prompt in first, okay, and then once the model gets that prompt, right, but you also will pass this function declaration in, you'll let the model know maybe like a special utility you want them to do. Okay, so for example, it can be something like tell me the weather. Okay, but like as I mentioned just now, right, Gemini wouldn't know what's the weather because they do have like future data. So once you let them know that they can do this, okay, what will happen is that the model will actually come back to you telling you that, okay, well, I cannot predict the weather, but I want to let your application, this is your backend application, I want to let your backend application know that the user is asking for the weather. Okay, because for your application, they can't really digest this prompt, right? But the model can digest that prompt. So the model will be the one to tell you instead that you can do that. Okay, and once the context comes back to your application, that the user wants to look for weather, then on your end, right, all you need to do is just call your own API. Like you can just call some random weather API to get the weather response. Okay, and from there, once you have that response, you can immediately just pass it back to the model, and then they will use that to generate a good response for your users. So essentially, it's a bit of that going into that RAG functionality that I mentioned, right? But what you're trying to do is to give accurate utility or data to Gemini so that it can provide the best response for your users. Okay, so we're gonna see it work over here. Oh wow, this one is also like using the weather. So we're gonna see it in action over here. Okay, so let's run this while we are reading the function over here. So you can see over here that we're going to pass this prompt. So this is like the user's prompt asking for a certain like the weather. Okay, and we're going to let the model know that our application has this functionality of getting the weather. Okay, and what happens is that the model will look at this and they will understand that the user is looking for the weather. And what they will do is they will call this function, this method of get current weather, which is this method over here. Okay, so this is essentially this one part that I showed you over here, them calling, sending a response back to our application and letting us know that we can call this function. Okay, so over here, they will invoke this method. And of course, this one, we should actually be calling an API. But I think over here, they're trying to just make it work as fast as possible. So this is just a simple dictionary where from the location that's passed in, let's say in this case it's Austin, right? So Austin, they'll just get the value of hot and return it back to the model, which will display that is hot in Austin. Yeah. So of course, you can change this to, let's say, Seattle. So I'll change to Seattle, and then it should return me the weather of raining instead. Yeah, so it's raining in Seattle. Okay, like I said, right, over here, you're not calling this method directly. You're just passing the user prompt of like the user asking what's the weather in Seattle, okay? And then using this utility to find out like what's the weather, okay? Now, of course, one thing I like to also share is that if let's say you try and ask it a question for utility that doesn't work, right, then it would not basically nothing would it would basically say something like it cannot do that certain function. So for example, let's try and ask it something like, I don't know, like what is the smoke level in Austin? Yeah. So you can see over here. I'm sorry, I cannot fulfill this request. The available tools lack the desired functionality. Yeah. So this is essentially what's to show you the function calling utility here lah. If you don't create that right function calling utility, they won't be able to solve it if they see a very different query. But of course, if I create a different function over here and I call it get smoke level, then they would be able to call this function instead. Yeah. Yeah. And of course, you need to make sure you describe like what this function does over here. You don't just create the function and don't add anything to it. Okay. So do try and run this and see if it works. Oh, sorry about that. Okay. Give me a moment. Okay, let me uncomment this. So hopefully that makes sense. Oh. Yeah, hopefully that makes sense. Okay, so that's just one way of doing function calling. So there's also another way of doing function calling, which is using the Open API specification. So the difference over here is basically for this Python function calling, right? It's automatic. Okay, automatic here means that because they know that they can call this current weather method, right? They'll just call this directly. Okay, but if you're using the Open API standard, right, you should be able to, like for yourself to manually call this function yourself. Okay, so this is how it works. If you look at this code over here, right, essentially, like, okay, you can see over here this generate content method. You will pass like some sort of reference to the functions that can be supported inside this model or this utility that you're trying to push for here. Okay, but you can see that when I run this method, right, they actually like there's no this destination tool over here, right, is actually not linked to any functions that I've created over here. Okay, because what we have done over here is we've just only declared, like use the Open API standard to declare this function or this utility that we can support. Okay, and all it does is you just tell this model that, okay, if there is this let's say in this case, right, I want to this destination to is to find out, like, the destination that the user wants to go to. So over here, right, what we're just telling the model is that if you think that this tool is supposed to be invoked, then let us know it needs to be invoked, but don't do the automatic calling. So just let us know that we need to do this call manually. Okay, and you can see over here that when I'm printing this response, right, you just tell you that, okay, yeah, you have to call this get destination method. Okay, so it's manual because later on, right, you have to do this comparison yourself and then call the method yourself, like whether this is like actually the actual name of a method, or if you want to call something else, like let's say you link this to the API to get the destination back and then passing back to the model. So because it's manual, that's why it's called manual function calling over here. Yeah. Okay, so huge difference. If you're using an Open API specification, this is manual function calling. If not, if you're doing the what's that, the way in Python itself using the SDK, then it's automatic. Okay, one last part. We're going a little bit fast because we are running out of time. But this last part is basically just code execution. So what happens over here is very interesting. You're asking the model itself to generate code and then use the code to solve its query. I think there are very rare instances where this would happen, but there are still, regardless, some instances where this can happen. Maybe more math-based queries when you are talking to the chatbot over here. Yeah. So let's say in this case, I think for yourself, your query will be something like this, right? Getting the 20th Fibonacci number and finding the nearest palindrome to it. Yeah. So you can use code execution over here to be able to generate the code required to do this calculation. Yeah, so let's try and run this output. Okay, and you can see over here that they generate the code required to get a Fibonacci number, the Fibonacci sequence based on the input that you put over here. Okay, like I said, this is based on what you ask over here. Okay, and then they don't just give you the code. They also give you like the output that you want as well from there. Yeah. Okay, and this of course don't just work for the Fibonacci number lah. I mean, you can also, like in this case, if you want to output digits of pi, you can also do that. Yeah. So for example, over here, I ask you to output the 10th number of pi. Yeah. So they also give a method for, like, you can run this yourself later on as well to get the digits of pi. Yeah. And then they will give you the actual output they're supposed to see from this. Yeah. So very interesting, nifty way, additional functionalities that you can use the Gen AI SDK interacting with Gemini. Limited use case, but nonetheless, I think this is interesting. Like they're trying to expand their utility as much as possible. Oh yeah, actually now talking about it, actually maybe it's also good for students. You can use this for your own assignments, I guess. Yeah. Okay, anyway, we've come to the end of this sharing. Okay, but I just want to add a little bit more. So before we go to Q&A, which is that the slides I've shared with y'all, there's also actually a second lab over here that I would encourage y'all to try because it covers more concepts as well, like context caching, batch requests, text embeddings over here. So definitely go here and try that other lab if you want to learn more about the Gen AI SDK and how you use it. All right. So yeah, anyway, that's the end of my sharing over here. Thanks for listening in. Hopefully, this has been helpful to you in terms of learning how this Gen AI SDK works, how you can build good applications with this, with controlled generation, with function calling, and then creating good value for your users. All right, if you want to reach out to me, do reach out to me on LinkedIn. I would be happy to answer any questions you have from there. Yeah, let me know if you have any questions as well.
All right. Thank you so much, Mr. Wayman, for the very insightful session. The demo was super fun, and I really hope that everyone also had so much fun doing it. I definitely do need that code generator. Please send that over to us. But yeah, thank you so much, Mr. Wayman. And yeah, now we'll be opening up the Q&A session. The link will be sent to the chat. A slider link. Yep. Yes, so anyone who has a question can drop your question in the link. So to kick things off, I actually wanted to ask you, Mr. Wayman. So you mentioned that there's a lot of trends in cloud computing, right? So what are the main trends that students should focus on now that would benefit them the most?
AI. There really is not too much to add over there. I would definitely say it's AI. But I like to show you also a slide deck that I did for a different session. Okay, so let me show you. This is a completely different session, by the way. This is not this one that we're doing today, but I think it's very relevant to the trends that we're looking at, which is so if you know of your seniors from school maybe 5 years ago, even 10 years ago, right, they would have observed this trend before. Like I think this is maybe more for millennials, where the earlier trend before we reach the AI, before we reach the generation of AI, is that there was the mobile computing era as well as the cloud era. Okay, and that led us down the path of democratization. Okay, sorry, this one, democratization of personal computing and ability to host these applications online. So back then, cloud computing and mobile computing was like all the craze. But today, in 2020, 10 years later, it's almost like, it's every 10 years, but 10 years later, AI is the next important thing. I would say that for most developers today, it's about figuring out how you can use AI to help yourself do different things. And I want to be clear on that. It's democratization of this capability here of how can I create AI-powered products? Like not just creating, let's say, a HTML form on the front end and sending it to the back end and calling maybe like some e-commerce API to sell something. I mean, more so than that, how can I use API to generate a new utility? Like, we talk about Ghibli images, like mashing things together. Of course, that one is a bit of a copyright issue, but it's a good way of showing that, you can use AI to do combinational creativity. And also, of course, using AI in your day-to-day, like for your coding assistance, using it in your work or in your schoolwork as well. Uh, Hopefully you are using the Gemini Code Assist, but at least maybe even something like, I know it's not part of Google Cloud, but at least something like GitHub Copilot is also good. You know, I'm sure I think most of you would also have like that school license for that as well. Do use that, learn from that, like see what code they generate, but use that not as a way to do vibe coding, but use it as a way for them to help you out to generate like the very mechanical or like things like, you know, you have to read the documentation to solve it, right? But you can use this coding assistance to give you the answers right away. I think that is the big value of this coding assistance as well. So yeah, definitely look towards this trend of this democratization of capability in what you can build and what you can empower yourself to generate.
All right, all right.
Mm.
Okay, so the second question. Yes, the question says it's quite hard to follow, but from what I've seen in the class, I need to be quite good in Python first before going for AI, right? So what do you think, Mr. Raven?
Oh no, I'm sorry. Okay, okay. I mean, hopefully, you'll be able to get. I think there's this recording here. Hopefully, you'll be able to relook at this again later on. I know this is a huge lab. Anyway, I think it's very hard to squeeze all of this in like a 1.5 hour window. But yeah, do reach out to me on LinkedIn. I'll be glad to, you know, answer some of your questions there if you have when you're trying out this lab later on. And also, yeah, do use the slides to try and run through this yourself as well. I think self-learning is one of the best ways to master some of these concepts. Okay, but towards that question of Python, yes and no. If you are trying to be a data scientist, um, uh, perhaps I think learning Python would be good for a different, like, you know, that career. But for myself, as a application developer, I barely use Python. I mean, I do touch Python. I mean, we've just gone through Python. Clearly, I do know the syntax. I've used it for quite a while. I've used it to even build backend services as well. But I would say that it's not the main language today. There's no one main language, so to speak. I think if you look at the trends online, there's always so many different languages that, you know, different companies are using. Yeah. So if you're building applications using AI, for myself, I've used Ruby on Rails to build AI-powered applications. I've used Node.js as well. As long as you can find the right SDK supporting the right languages, it's not a problem. I think if I'm not wrong, Gen AI SDK is provided in at least in Node and Go as well. So you are not limited to Python only. But like I said, I think this one may be a little bit more tied to your career. But also, I want to give general advice over here. As someone who has done like software engineering over the last 11, 12 years, my main thing is learn how to onboard to, you know, different like systems that you build with your team members, or when you go intern in a company, like it like learn about the concepts behind the programming languages, like how to write good systems, not about the languages itself. I think all these languages in the end are just created by different pioneers at that time who are aiming for different things. It's very much opinionated towards like a particular outcome that they want from their language. But if you are a good programmer with good like deep principles, right? It doesn't matter which language you are learning. Like in the end, a function is a function. Creating a class here in a different language is just a different class. Once you know those basic concepts, right? Like moving between languages is not a problem.
Okay. Okay. So we'll be moving on to the next question. I think about the token, we will update you guys in the WhatsApp group. So we can move on to the next few questions. Mr. Raven, which one do you want to answer? That's quite some.
Uh,
Which one interests you the
what
most?
what advice would you give to students who want to become Google developer experts? Oh, step one would be to join the committee members, like the host over here. I'm being very serious. As in, I think the only way to become expert is like to first get closer to the community first, which is to do more community activities. Whether you are the one hosting it or whether you are the one, like, you know, while you're hosting it, because you interact more with these technologies, the opportunity also will come where you feel confident that you want to lead these sessions as well. Okay. And also you get to interact also with the experts in this industry. and it gives you more opportunities to learn more. Like it's not because you joining these communities that you get closer to be a GD, but it's that you get more opportunities to learn because of that. And I think that's the same journey for me myself as well, like getting more involved with the communities, then getting the opportunities to speak and contribute. And like it's actually to go through all those contributions first before you actually get to the stage of being considered as a GDE lah. Yeah. Yeah. Oh,
Okay,
can I jump to the
so
next question?
yep,
I can.
okay.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Let me jump to this next question. What can we create using Google Cloud? I will go back to that earlier slide that I use on this one, which is basically all these different things over here. It's not really answering the question. Well, it's partially answering the question, but not fully answering it. Like basically, what I'm just trying to show is that there's so many different managed services in the cloud, and it's really up to you. Like in the end, the question I'll ask over here is, what is the product idea that you are looking at? So let's say if you want to build a startup tomorrow, what is the product idea you want to solve? And then from there, right, move backwards towards what do you need to build to make that work. So if let's say if it's to build some IoT service, okay, look for IoT service in Google Cloud. Or if it's to build a website, okay, then look at compute engine or cloud run to host your services in Google Cloud. Okay, if it's a mobile application, you can look towards Firebase. Of course, there's Android there as well. So there's all these different services, but really in the end, right, it's about what you want to build and then lining it back to what services is provided for by not just Google Cloud, but also the whole ecosystem of Google together. Yeah. Okay. Should I focus more on Python than C++? Oh yeah, I think this one I would say I would go with the same answer I have earlier on. I think in my honest opinion, if you're good at programming, your underlying principles are good, it doesn't matter which language. That's really my honest opinion on this because I work in application development. I've seen engineers who transit very quickly from front end to back end, like JavaScript, into like from a non-typing language right into a typed language like Go, for example, yeah, or Rails into Go. If you're worth your salt, right? If you're hardworking, you figure out what the right ways to do things, create scalable scripts, services in these different languages, right? It doesn't matter which language you should go for. But okay, if let's say you're going data scientist and all that, I would say definitely. I believe Python would be the one that's most forefront. I don't know why in the back of my mind, I think R is another one that I've seen some people talk about, but not as regular. Yeah. So if specifically you're looking at data science, then yeah, Python probably is the one you want to go for lah. But if it's general application development, right, please don't go for Python lah. I mean, okay, specifically here you're asking about AI, but yeah, if it's application development, Python I would say is not a very good language for application development. Do employees get good paycheck? Software industry, I would say generally yes. Compared to other industries lah. AI definitely. I'm not exactly in. I'm not an AI researcher. But if you are in the FANG, I guess FANG companies, and if you are doing AI, I bet you're going to be earning a lot of money. As an application developer, what's your biggest struggle in computing languages? On computing languages, and do you think AI has been beneficial to you? What is my okay? I'm going to change this to what's my biggest struggle. Surprisingly, humans. Okay, I'm not saying it as a joke. Humans, as in that, we are sort of our own biggest enemies, lah. In the way that everyone like we try to collaborate and build the best code base possible, but everyone's best intentions, sometimes my best intention is not the best intention of someone else, like they don't see it the same way because we may also think differently of what the best standards are. So essentially you end up with a code base that if the principles are done really well, of course it can last for 5 years, 10 years, but I think of code bases I've seen in the industry, it's not always that perfect. So you end up, going through a situation where people will talk about, okay, we need to rewrite this code base again. And of course, this takes substantial time. I'm not saying it always happens, but I'm saying that you always reach the level of you have to see how long you can tolerate with a particular code base, or whether you can improve it enough to make it work to the point where you sort of have to hit the reset button and sort of restart all over again. That's it. Going towards AI, actually, yes, for the two things that I mentioned just now, building AI powered applications as well as using coding assistance. I think coding assistance has been the one big benefit. And I think as like for all of you, right, as students right now, right, you guys are in a very good time right now where you are growing up with this service. It's something that I wish it was there for me years ago. It's allowing me now, right, at this point to scale so much faster. Like for example, let's say like my day-to-day job, I need to look at, let's say, writing a script to ingest this JSON file, and then be able to save that to a database. You know what's the first thing I'll do? The first thing I'll do is go to Google, search for the library that's required to read that file, or look for a documentation to read that file. Because the thing is that I don't remember all these libraries. I'm not going to memorize this as well. Like, this is not principle. This is just documentation knowledge. But using AI, right, I can just ask AI a question and like coding assistance, and it can generate that code for me very quickly. And it's not that, and I want to be very clear, it's not that I will get rusty over time. Like, I think using this, right, allows me to be able to ramp up much more quickly without having to search for the documentation myself. Like, if anything, it's more like, yeah, maybe I'll get rusty at Googling, but I mean, it's Googling. Like, I don't think that that's something that would be very much irrelevant over time. Yeah, so definitely it's a very huge, it has been like a huge multiplier. Actually, if anything, just to say maybe like a funny statement, that if anything, I see more so that folks of my generation and above are not adapting well to this like AI, like coding assistance. So if you know of your seniors who are outside working, they are not adapting to it yet, do persuade them, like try it out, like give it a chance. I personally, for myself, I'm very bewildered as well by, I mean, I understand it, but at the same time, like now that I'm so used to coding assistance, I am also bewildered by the sentiment that people are afraid they'll get rusty, like if I rely on coding assistance too much, which I think is not true, because in the end you still have to read the code that's generated. You should of course not do vibe coding. You should really learn together with like this accelerated pace of like code generation. Yeah. Okay, this next part. I'm impressed with the YouTube URL feature. I asked about a specific part with no transcript and it nailed the timing. Does Gemini use computer vision for that? That's a good question, and I'm not going to say I don't know. Like, it's accurate to that sense of, I think this is perhaps like this is their own internal like managed service or like internal workings of it lah. So I don't have an answer for that, but I think this is part of their own multi-modal features where, like for example, think about it as if you pass an audio clip, and like does it use like a similar technology to get to that particular timestamp if you're asking for a certain topic. I would say that it's definitely going to encompass some level of computer vision, perhaps, but this is in the end a managed service that they optimize for like us to use, like AI services on there. So my response is in a different way, like more of, actually it doesn't matter to us, but it's more so of, can they support the utility and allow us to leverage off that so that we don't have to build our own computer vision logic, right? Or ramping up our own infrastructure required for that, right? To solve our own computer vision problems. Should I join more of this kind of talk or event to get hired in the future? Wow, this one I'll leave to your host to maybe answer that later. Specifically for student workshops, maybe not lah, but community events like those physical community events, yes. Especially I think I do work with the GDG communities. I think I believe you all are in KL if I'm not wrong, right? So GDG KL, GDG Cloud KL. I've been in part of the physical events as well, where you see like employers going to those events too. Okay, this last part. Have I heard of MCP? Yes, I've heard about it a lot more recently. Can I host another study jam about it? Oh, unfortunately, I would like to say I'm not expert at this yet. But I definitely do think that this is going to be a very interesting. I think for folks who don't know what MCP is, I think this essentially would be is essentially a protocol indicating more towards integration between AI services towards other services that wants to be integrated with these AI services. The whole backdrop of this is AI agents. Okay, and essentially, can I just talk to, like, let's say Gemini, and it can just integrate, like get an entire integration with all these different tools. So essentially just AI agents and get it to work everything for me without me having to do all of this work. Okay, and I think this one, the larger part of it would be how many companies, like the question I'll ask is how many companies would implement this in the next half a year to 1 year? Like I think that question, right, how well that answer it, or the response would be, right, would be the determining factor of whether you need to pay attention to, maybe not saying to learn it, lah, but at least know how you can integrate AI agents making use of MCP. Yeah. Okay, anyway, I think that's all the questions, but yeah, I think it was so way over time as well. But thanks for all these questions. Thanks for all this liveliness, all these questions that I asked here. I really appreciate this. Yeah.
Yes, thank you so much for answering all of the questions, Mr. Raven. Also, thank you so much for the participants for all the questions. It was very detailed and insightful. Okay, so before we end the workshop, we also have a quick feedback form in the chat. So if you guys can take your time to fill it up, it will be also used for your certificates. So now we can move on to the photography session. So anyone who can open your cam, please to do so. We'll be giving you guys a few minutes to open your cam. Join us, come join us. And also I'll be passing it to the technical team to handle the photography session. Come on guys, wanna see your pretty faces? Hey, hello Joy. Hello Nick. Hello Lim. Hello. Um,
So I think we'll wait for 1 more minute or 1 to 2 minutes for everyone to get ready and open up their camera. Then we can proceed with the photography session. So okay, I think we can start taking photos now. So everyone, just give a big smile to the camera. Okay, so 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Okay, so everyone do the Google developer pose. So 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Okay, thank you everyone.
Thank you. Thank you everyone for opening your cam, and thank you so much for Mr. Raymond for this workshop. So I hope everyone enjoyed this. Thank you so much for joining us. See you guys in the next event. Bye bye. Thank you.